welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 podcast network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. While you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. Hey, you got to sign up for that Inklings Academy. It's out, and it's good. I mean, have you seen the trailer? If you haven't seen the trailer, if you've seen the trailer, you're probably taking the Academy. I mean, the trailer is that good. I mean, the trailer, if that don't make you want to take that Academy, you're just not. You need to go to the doctor, get your heart checked, see if you're alive. This Academy is real impressive. It's really good. It's just really fun, too. Like, they're fun characters to get to know, and so you can do that for free. There's a link in the show notes. You should check out the Academy. Also, of course, if you haven't bought, this has been out for now, but if you haven't bought Chad's book, Hitchhiking with Prophets, also a link in the show notes. His new book, you got to check that out. It's the prophets, and we haven't really got to the prophets yet. So get that sneak peek of probably where we're headed. You can get ahead of the game a little bit. Also, our buddy Matt Popovits has a book available for pre-order.
I wrote an endorsement for it. Yeah, it's a phenomenal book. In fact, as of this recording, it sits as the #1 new release in Christology on Amazon. So it's already doing well.
Yeah, it's really good. Matt did a really good job. Matt Popovits, friend of the show, friend of 1517. It's called Junk Drawer Jesus. Come on, you want to get that? And it's not a difficult read. Really easy read. It's fun to read. You will not have a difficult time getting through it. It's really engaging. So there's a link to that, I'm sure, in the show notes too. If not, I'll put it there. So get all that, do all that, take that Academy, get Chad's book, get Matt's book, and we're going to get into Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Now, look, man, he's still on a downer right now. You know he was talking about death coming for everyone. He's been talking about that. Every time he tries to tell you something good, it's like he remembers that he is going to die. And the first word of chapter 10, Chad, of course, is dead.
Yeah, dead flies at that, which is what a great way to start out a chapter. Of course, the chapter divisions are somewhat arbitrary, but that is probably one of the better beginnings of a chapter. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment stink.
Yeah.
So quite a beginning. So I think this is one of these cases where our chapter divisions probably aren't very helpful because he's continuing a thought that he began at the end of the previous chapter. So let me pick up with 9, 17, and 18. And yeah, I know we talked about those in the last episode, but just to kind of bring you up to speed. If you're not listening to these like one after the other, this is a reminder where we closed last time. The words of the wise, heard in quiet, are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Okay, so we have this idea of, what do we say? One rotten apple spoils the whole barrel, or something along those lines.
My mom told me that.
One bad apple ruins the whole barrel. Yeah.
Yeah. Did she ever tell you? Your parents ever tell you that when maybe you were hanging out with someone they thought maybe you shouldn't be hanging out with, and you're like, it's fine. They're like, one bad apple, it spoils the whole barrel.
I think what I always heard was if you hang out with dogs, you're going to get fleas, I believe is what his way was. It's not the same kind of proverbial truth, but that was what in my part of Texas, that was kind of the proverb.
None of these are like flattering ways to talk about people.
No, they're not. So so he finishes chapter 9 by saying this one sinner, it's all it takes, is one bad apple. One sinner is going to mess up a whole lot of good stuff. And then he continues this with that opening of chapter 10, where you have this, a perfumer's done his or her work, made this ointment, mixed. I don't know how this works, but they're doing their craft, and they get this all together. Maybe they make a bottle, maybe they make more than that, and something goes wrong, and flies get in there. And, you can imagine my wife didn't wear much perfume, but if she was looking at a perfume bottle and there's one dead fly, not to mention 2 or 3, well, that's going to ruin it all. And that's kind of picking up the same idea. It doesn't take a lot doesn't take a lot of bad to mess up a whole lot of good. I mean, Jesus and Paul both pick up the same idea with the image of leaven, of course. You know,
Yep.
little leaven leavens the whole lump, which is I think there maybe is a one positive use of that image, but most of those images are negative. So you get the idea basically. Whether you're talking about dead flies and ointment, or one apple with a whole bunch of other apples, or a little yeast, a little leaven in yeast, it's all communicating the same truth, and that is, in the words of Ecclesiastes, at the end of this first verse, a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. I mean, aside from the Proverbs, we've all experienced this, where you get a good thing going, and somebody comes along and they mess it all up, right? We've all experienced this firsthand in traffic. You can have 5,000 cars on the road, and one guy looking at his phone who ends up rear-ending somebody else during rush hour on the interstate. Now, all it takes is his one act to affect negatively every other commuter's life in the hundreds, if not the thousands of people.
But yeah,
So
the thing I like
it works
best
in
about
life.
that is that it's always someone else.
It is always someone else.
You
Yeah.
know,
It's never us.
no, we wouldn't be the fly in the perfume or the bad apple, but you gotta watch out for them. That's the thing that's interesting about this is that Solomon does say like, oh man, it just takes one sinner, and which is true. Of course, this I think is a callback all the way to Genesis, which I think we talked about last time. It did just take one sinner. That's all it took, and but it turns out that that one sinner also. Now we're all sinners, and so if it only takes one sinner to destroy all the wisdom, what can you do with a whole world full of them, right? I mean, you have no chance. It's not like it's not like there's just one sinner running around ruining everything for the rest of us.
Yeah. Now we have a world that is in which wisdom and honor are far outweighed by folly and everything that accompanies it. So that's the first verse. He goes on in these next few verses to string together a whole lot of proverbs, and this can be a little bit confusing. In fact, I think can be is probably not the right way to put that. Is a little bit confusing because this is not the way that Koheleth has been communicating through most of his book. He's been pretty straightforward. I mean, you can like it or you can not like it, but at least what he is communicating tends to be pretty straightforward. Now he switches gears, and he's been doing this last chapter too, where he begins to put together these proverbial truths, which on the surface are, for the most part, understandable. I mean, you can say, okay, this is the proverb, this is the truth, the more underlying or abstract truth that's communicated in proverbial form. That is usually pretty straightforward. What's not as easy to understand is how these proverbs fit within the overall message of Ecclesiastes. And on top of that, how they cohere together. So are we looking at just a bunch of random proverbs that he decided to put in this chapter? Probably not. That wouldn't make any sense. He's probably looking for some sort of unifying theme. So we have to ask, okay, what is that unifying theme? And that does become a bit of a challenge. And I surveyed, I think, 3 commentaries this morning on these chapters, and some of them take a more general approach. Some of them take a more specific approach. So I think it was Dwayne Garrett's commentary. He's arguing that what Solomon is doing in chapter 9 is basically giving advice to those who are in leadership positions. So this is how, if you're a ruler, this is how you should make your decisions. This is how you should conduct your life so that you don't go down the path of folly, but you stay on the path of wisdom. The other ones argue, and I tend to gravitate this way too, that this isn't really specifically wisdom advice to rulers, but it's more wisdom advice to the general reader. And it's teaching us about the way of folly, the way of wisdom, as well as some very particulars within that, such as the need not to procrastinate and to lean upon the providential care of God. Even if you don't know the outcome of something, you trust that in one way or another, God is going to bring good out of it. So that's the direction that I go, that we're learning about wisdom, folly, as it applies not just kind of to the rulers, but to the general reader. So he starts out then by presenting this general truth of how a little bit of folly can outweigh wisdom and honor. And then he goes on, verse 2, to say, a wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Um, this fits with not just the Old Testament, but the New Testament focus upon the right being good and the left not being good. This is all over the place. For instance, if you have someone at your right hand, that's the position of honor. When you're giving a blessing, you typically do that with your right hand. If you jump ahead to the Gospels, it's the believers who are on the right hand of Christ, and the unbelievers who are on the left. So typically, right is positive, good, the place of blessedness, and the left has these kind of negative connotations to it. So in this case, going to have the wise of heart, they are inclining to the right, and the fool's heart is inclining to the left. In other words, I mean, it's kind of a straightforward truth that the wise are going to go one way and the fools are going to go another way. They're not going to share the same pathway because they have different goals and they have different aims and different motivations for doing what they do. And then he continues with verse 3 to talk more about the fool. He says, even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense. And he says to everyone that he is a fool. I think what he means by that is his foolishness is so obvious. I mean, it's just it's unmissable. All he has to do is walk along the road, and everybody knows that this guy is a fool by what he says, by the way he acts, by the decisions that he makes. It is patently obvious that we're dealing here not with a wise person, but with a fool. So that he says to everyone that he's a fool means that in his actions, in his speech, in what he does do and what he doesn't do, he's clearly communicating that he belongs in the category of those who are on the left, those who are walking the path of foolishness.
Yeah, I mean, the idea here is that a wise man walks one way and a foolish man walks another way. And you could tell by the way he walks that you wouldn't be going that way if you were wise, because I could tell just by the road you're on that you are, in fact, a fool, without you saying anything, right? It'd be like if you saw a guy, you walk up on a guy and he's sticking his hand in a rattlesnake pit. I don't have questions about whether or not this is a wise man or not. His actions are screaming to me that he's a fool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All you have to do is scroll through social media to see see a lot of evidence of the path of foolishness and the path of wisdom. So that's verse 3. Verse 4 is going to pick up with a little bit different theme. He says, "If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place. For calmness will lay great offenses to rest." This probably isn't just calmness, but as one scholar by the name of Fox, he's a well-known scholar on wisdom literature. He argues this is also the kind of the ability to soothe or to calm. So not just maintaining a calm composure, but being able to communicate that to the ruler. So if a ruler is angry against you, then don't storm out, don't leave, don't retreat, but instead remain calm, keep your composure, and use that to kind of calm him down so that you don't make a bad situation even worse. I mean, we probably all experience things like that. If someone is angry at you, not even a ruler, but say it's your boss, okay? Your boss is angry at you because of whatever you've done. Well, maintaining calm and composure and kind of communicate that and responding not in kind, but responding in a calm and a peaceful sort of way tends to kind of calm things down. And he's applying it here in the case of a king or a ruler. So it's another way he's teaching wisdom to us, in other words.
I know this, that I'm a pretty good arguer, so I can win arguments reasonably well. However, I have never won an argument with my brother, like ever. And this is not because he is always right and I'm always wrong. This is not the case. He's wrong all the time. But he has never lost his cool or gets frustrated or loses his temper ever. And it actually makes you give up. If it, like he like you could be so riled up about something and he just won't go there with you, and he wins the argument because his ability to stay so calm throughout the whole thing. And at first,
Yeah.
it's extremely frustrating until you finally just give up.
Well, that's the good way to approach a lot of situations in life. To use social media again as an example, I mean, you don't have to spend more than 5 seconds on social media to witness, at least in written form, people yelling at each other.
Yeah.
And the more the debate goes on, the more heated the rhetoric becomes. And so the best way is either just don't argue, or if you do, be calm, be composed, be gentle, and a lot of times that will simply diffuse the situation.
But
So
what's also true is that even like in reality, sometimes when that's going on, the other person gets more and more angry because you're not getting angry.
you're not responding
Yeah,
appropriately.
and even if you don't end up sort of getting them to calm down, or they storm off or whatever, and they say all these things, what's certainly true is in the eyes of everyone watching, you have prevailed.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the
No
person
doubt
might
about
not
that.
like admit that, like, just, I mean, here he's saying like, hey, for calmness will lay great offense to rest. And maybe now that person might walk off enraged and stuff, but for everyone else, they'd be like, oh well, you see how unhinged this other guy was? Like, clearly
Hmm.
this guy's being much more thoughtful, and he's probably right because I mean, look at how he was responding to this.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
much better way to be.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely so.
Also, it's the worst feeling ever if you do like lose it on somebody. If you're like in an argument and you finally just like throw your hands up and are frustrated, and you gave them like just a huge tongue lashing, and you walk away, but you lost. You know that you lost once you did that, and you know that everyone
Yeah.
else knows you lost too, and it's the
Oh, yeah.
worst.
That is the worst. It's a sting to the ego for sure. So he goes on from there to give more advice with specifically regard to living under a ruler and how things are often topsy turvy in this world. He says in verse 5 through 7, there's an evil that I've seen under the sun, like an error, or as it were, an error proceeding from the ruler. So this is something that Koheleth has observed. A ruler does something which is translated here as an error. The Hebrew there, shagaga, could be like an inadvertent sin or an unintentional mistake, something like that. Could be from negligence, for forgetfulness, or accident, whatever it is, some kind of error. And so, what is this? Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses and princes walking on the ground like slaves. So here you get a couple of categories, and this may be offensive to modern sensitivities, but just kind of keep in mind that he's working here with categories. So you got, on the one hand, you've got uh, folly kind of personified here, and in that same category would be slaves. So Solomon is using those as the people who should not be honored, and as those who are lowly. And then in the other category are the rich and princes, and he's using these as examples of those who are characterized by those who should receive honor and those who are wise. So those are the two categories he's working with. You can disagree or agree or like or not like the way that he's treating this, but these are his categories he's working with. So he says everything is often upside down because you have this ruler who's made an error, and he's taken foolish people and he's elevated them to high places. And then he's taken the rich people who, in Koheleth's view, should be in these high places, and now they're sitting in a low place. And then he's seen slaves who should be walking on the ground, riding on horses, which should be reserved for princes, but instead the princes are walking on the ground like they are slaves. And I think in the overall structure of Koheleth, the reason he's using this is to point to the fact that the world in which we live, this life under the sun, is often exemplified by things being topsy turvy, being upside down, not the way that they should be. And so, don't be surprised when you encounter things in life where a fool is in this high position and a wise man is in a low position, and those who should be honored are dishonored, and those who should be dishonored are honored. Welcome to life under the sun.
Yeah, I don't think this is. I think this is the sort of slaves and princes and stuff. This is all just him painting a picture. Not that a prince, because he is a prince, like, oh man, his feet better never touch the ground. But more that that people that you would assume should be honored, much of the time are not, and people that you would assume don't deserve any honor are.
Yeah, that's man. I think today's world and how people that are infamous for all kinds of dishonorable actions are often those who become famous. Not infamous, but famous and honored, and the limelight is on them, right? Uh, this is the way it works in the world. So verse 8, picking up from there, he goes on to say, "He who digs a pit will fall into it, and a serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones is hurt by them, and he who splits logs is endangered by them. If the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength, but wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage to the charmer." Now, these proverbs are an example of how I know when I first read through these, I was like, okay, what's his point? I kind of I get the proverbs, but how does this fit into his overall argument? And I think what's going on is this. So he begins by in verse 8 by talking about those who are engaging in acts of folly. Well, it ends up just boomeranging back to hurt them. It's an axiomatic truth in the scriptures that, for instance, if you dig a pit, you're going to fall into it. If you set a trap for somebody else or a snare for somebody else, you're going to get caught in that. So you end up reaping what you've sown, and that's kind of what is being communicated in that first verse. So if you act in ways that are congruent with a foolish life, that very foolishness will be your downfall. And then he goes on to verse 9 to say, okay, but here's what also happens in this world. You can be doing the right thing. You can be doing your job. You can be doing that which is in accordance with what you should do, acting wisely. And you could still get hurt because you could be quarrying stones, and that's your job, but you could get hurt by these stones. You could be splitting logs, and you could be endangered by this work. So he's using Proverbs to illustrate the fact that, yeah, some things are fairly certain in this world. Like if you act according to folly, then that folly will hurt you. But there's other things in life which are out of your control. You can be doing the right thing, you can be doing your job, and at the same time, then something bad could befall you. So how should you proceed? Well, one way is by making sure that you're prepared. So that's what he's communicating here in verse 10. If the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he has to use more strength. But wisdom helps one to succeed. So, of course, if you have someone with an axe and they're wanting to cut a bunch of logs, well, the wise person is going to sharpen the axe first. Of course, that's how it's designed to be used. And this proverbial truth then applies to all of life, that we should be prepared rather than rushing into something. Do it with forethought and with preparation. And then he concludes this particular section with another proverb that talks about how we should have foresight. We should be thinking ahead, be ready for something, because if the serpent bites before it's charmed, there's no advantage to the charmer. So just like in that case, you charm the serpent so that it doesn't bite you. So you do what's necessary ahead of time to prepare for something so that no bad may result. Now, on the surface, of course, these proverbs are fairly straightforward, but I think they flow into the argument because he's been putting before us the way of wisdom and the way of folly, but he also wants to make sure that we realize that there are situations in life where it doesn't matter how wise you are, bad things can still befall you. Just like if you're splitting logs, you could be cut, or if you're quarrying stones, you could be hurt.
Yeah, I do think this last one is kind of funny though. Like, hey man, don't live your life like a fool. Don't be so foolish that you be like somebody who it's like I'm going to be a snake charmer and then not have trained any snakes to be charmed. You just like sit down with a snake one day and decide you're gonna everyone gather around. I'm gonna charm this snake real quick. Like, it's a pretty good illustration of like living a foolish life.
Yeah, yeah, that's a quick way to get to the hospital real fast. Okay, so picking up with 12. Um, the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor. That could also be translated as they're like his words are gracious, something along those lines. But it's contrasted then with the lips of a fool. So if the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, then the lips of a fool, what do? Well, they eat him up. They consume him. So better to be wise and to use your speech to win favor rather than being a fool and end up just speaking words that come back to bite you, that consume you. So again, just kind of building on this theme of the wise way and the foolish way. The beginning, verse 13, the beginning of the words of his mouth, that is the fool, the beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. So just like he did a few verses prior, where he first contrasts the wise and the foolish, and then he expounds more upon the fool. So he does here. Not only do the lips of a fool consume him, even the beginning of his words are foolishness. And if that beginning is foolishness, well, what is going to be the end except evil madness? This fits, of course, with not just Proverbs, but all over the Bible, where it talks about the speech of the fool, or how the words of one's mouth are revelatory of the heart. A foolish heart is going to speak foolish words. And he's not done. Verse 14 is going to go on to talk more about foolish speech. What does a fool do? A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him. So not only is a fool just talking and talking and talking as if he knows what's going on, he not only doesn't know what's going on, but he doesn't know what is going to be after him. So he's speaking of that of which he has no knowledge. And speaking from ignorance, he reveals the fact that he is indeed a fool. And then he finishes out this section about fools by saying in verse 15, the toil or the labor of a fool wearies him. So he's not finding any pleasure in his work. He doesn't enjoy it. He doesn't want to do it. The toil or the labor of a fool wearies him. Then this is kind of, I think this is funny. He says, he does not know the way to the city. And I think what he means there is this guy is so lost morally, ethically. He's so confused. He's so turned around. He's so empty of knowledge that he can't even give you directions to where the city's at. So I think that's what that means. He doesn't know the way to the city. So don't ask this guy even for directions. Don't inquire of him about even the most mundane of matters, because all he's going to do is lead you astray.
Yeah, and this city's a good example of that. I mean, hey, do you know where that huge city is and how to get there? Don't. He's going to send you like off into the swamp somewhere, like with with these directions.
Right.
And this is kind of like a fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be. This is the proverbial know-it-all, right? Like the know-it-all usually knows nothing. This is how this works, right? Where somebody that would give you the answers to everything and has thoughts on everything, they are multiplying a lot of words, but this is the last person to listen to. So probably this guy is very eager to give you directions to the city.
Yeah, never trust someone who has all the answers to everything.
Well, that guy will give you directions to the city, but he'll tell you about a secret shortcut that
Oh yeah,
will
yeah.
inevitably lead you to your death.
To where you do not want to be. Yeah.
Like, there's a
I just
main
was
road
having
over there. Most people go that way, but let me tell you, I've discovered a better way.
yeah.
There's a shortcut.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we all know where those shortcuts end up. Okay, so that takes us through verse 15, verse 16 then. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child. The Hebrew there is na'ar, which can be translated child, boy, lad, young man. The emphasis here, though, is that it's not really on physical age, but more on immaturity. So, woe to you, O land, when your king is immature, we might say, and your princes feast in the morning. Okay, so that's the one side, the woe to you. What is the happy are you? Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time. So once more, the two ways. You got a woeful land where you've got an immature ruler, and you got princes who are feasting in the morning. In other words, they're doing things at improper time. Rather than being engaged in the duties that they should be engaged in, they're living it up. I mean, right away in the morning, what they want to do, they just want to have a party, more or less. But the happy land is when the king is the son of the nobility. In other words, this is Koheleth's category for those who are mature, those who belong in these places of honor. So you got a happy land when your king is mature and he's the right kind of king, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. So everything in its proper time and everyone in their proper place according to the wisdom that they have. And he's going to go on to verse 18 to talk more about uh, fools and kind of the long term effects of walking that path. And he does so through this image. Verse 18 says, through sloth, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. I think what he's getting at there is there's not always a kind of precipitous bad thing that happens when someone acts foolishly. Oftentimes, this is kind of a slow decay that takes that takes time, but eventually the end result is the same. So it's kind of the image of it. You got a roof that is leaking, and the next thing you know, it's leaking in 4 or 5 different places. And over time, if you don't fix it, it's gonna fall in on you. So is a life that is characterized by foolishness. One foolish leak leads to another one, leads to another one, and eventually the whole thing collapses around you. Now, verse 19 is a challenge.
Yeah, it
Uh,
seems out of place, right? He's about to drop something on you that you're like,
yeah, like
wait,
what?
that is that like I feel like the Bible has told me the opposite of this.
Yeah, yeah. So here's the verse: bread is made for laughter, and by bread here, it's lahm in Hebrew, which isn't. I mean, sometimes it is just bread, but it's also the word just for food, food in general. So bread or food is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and drum roll, money answers everything.
There you go.
He's like, boy,
This is just
excuse
practical. This
me?
is just practical wisdom here, man. If you got a lot of food, and you got a lot of wine, and you got a lot of money, everything's gonna be good.
Everything's good.
I
Yeah.
mean, you got the
See,
answer for not just some things, but everything.
so this is interpreted a couple different ways. One positive, one negative. So there are those who would say that uh this verse means that the wise, they well, they have money and that allows them to pay for their food and wine that brings joy to their life. So that's kind of the positive interpretation. The negative interpretation is that the fool kind of dithers his life away in food and drink, thinking that money is the answer to everything. Now I'm a bit torn, but I lean toward the negative answer here that he's been talking a lot about fools in this section. So I think this is probably continuing that same negative uh, disapproval of the foolish way, where you have a fool just thinking that life is all about food for laughter and wine for life, and the accumulation of money, thinking that's going to be the answer to everything. So I mean, that's I don't think you can come down hard and fast on either side of that, just because the verse is a bit difficult. But that's where I lean anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no resurrection. Making sure you got enough to eat, enough to drink, and enough to pay for everything you want to have. I suppose. If you know, why does Jesus do this when he says he doesn't do this with a lot of other? You can make an idol out of everything and anything, which we've talked about before. But the easiest one to make an idol out of is money. I mean, money is like a really easy one, and so you have Jesus do this thing where he says, "You cannot serve two masters," and then he could have said, he says, "You cannot serve God and you cannot serve." He could say anything there.
Power. Yeah. There's
anything.
tons of things he could have said.
Yeah,
Sure.
but he says money, right?
Mhm.
Because I think that without God, money kind of is the best answer that you've got. For whatever it is. I mean, one, you're not going to go without, so that's good. I mean, your basic needs, money it's going to take care of that problem. But money can buy influence. If you get into trouble, you can. If you have a lot of money, you can have an easier time getting out of it. Like you can bribe people. I mean, if there is no God, the next best thing is to have all the money.
Yeah, I mean, people say that all the time. Like, money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a boat, which makes you happy, or it can buy you a second home, which makes you happy, or it can buy you whatever, right? So people do tend to, if they're going to turn to something besides the one true God, well, chances are money's going to be at least part of the pantheon,
Yeah.
if not the chief
Well,
deity in that pantheon.
Chad. I mean, money can't buy happiness, but I'd rather be sad in a yacht than not in a yacht. I mean,
Yes, precisely.
that's a joke, guys. No yachts. Don't have any yachts.
No, yeah,
We don't have that. But yeah, I think so. I think that is sort of the thing, right? So if you are talking about life just under the sun, and if you're not giving any thought to God, and if this is all you've got, and then you're gonna die one day, and that's the end. Yeah, I mean, having a lot of money will make the days of your miserable life the best miserable days they could probably be. Like I said, I think it's the reason Jesus says, like, these are you're going to want to serve God. That's great. The biggest draw away to have your heart divided is going to be this other thing, because it's the thing that most seems like it will help you.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with, you know, money. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. I mean, he could have said the love of a lot of other things too, right? But
Yep.
it is money that he focuses on there. And then finishing out this chapter with verse 20, even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter.
Yeah.
Now, don't take this literally, like there's listening birds, but I mean, we've all heard the proverb, a little bird told me, So that, in fact, was characteristic of ancient Near Eastern proverbial literature as well. So you have this idea of a little bird, a bird of the air, some winged creature is going to tell the matter. So be careful, even if you think it's just, if you think the person that you're with you can trust, or you're, in some safe place. Be careful. My wife likes to say, a secret is no longer a secret when two people know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
this is exactly. I mean, now you have this thing too, where this used to be like, well, I might tell you something, Chad, then you might let it slip what I said, and then you might tell that person. Now it's my word against your word about whether or not I said that thing, right? So like, that's good. But now, you might text me something. And now we have a different thing. Now it's my word against objective proof. And
Yes.
I was, my wife will be doing something, and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, so and so asked me about this thing. What should I say?" And maybe it'll be about asking her about somebody or whatever. And I always say the same thing. I'm like, I don't know, but however you answer it in a way that you are 100% fine with the person that you're talking about reading.
Yeah. That is That's wisdom right there.
That's
That
what I
is
would.
for
That's
sure.
what I would
Yeah.
say. Like, don't say anything that you're not fine with them receiving a screenshot of later.
Yep. Because a bird of the air may carry that voice.
Little Twitter bird
Little Twitter bird.
might
Yes.
put that thing out there. So,
All right, we better wrap it up here.
yep,
I
we are
think we
out of
just
time.
out of time. So, but we will finish Ecclesiastes next week,
No matter what
and
is
no
happening.
matter what. Yeah. So that's the plan. We'll see you then.
All right, man. See you then.